healthcare-associated scabies due to his recent inpatient stay. The IP knows that his scabies infestation is not healthcare-associated because A, scabies is only transmitted through contaminated linens, and the IP confirmed that all linens the patient came into contact with had been properly laundered. B, the incubation period for scabies is longer than 5 days. C, the incubation period for scabies is shorter than 3 days. And D, scabies is only transmitted through direct contact and none of the healthcare personnel who cared for the patient are infested. Okay, many of you are saying B. See what it goes here. Okay, good for you. I think most of you got that right. So the incubation period for scabies is longer than 5 days. So the IP knows that the person was not exposed in the hospital. So it can be as short as 10 days, but typically between 4 and 6 weeks. In this question, he would have had to have been exposed at least 5 days before he was admitted. So the next slides, we're gonna go back to the question about Norwegian scabies, and it appears to be contradictory, right? So this took I didn't notice it. Somebody on the call said that doesn't make sense. So this person has Norwegian scabies, and it looks like it was developed 48 hours later. The infection preventionist receives a report that the certified nursing assistant has developed an itchy rash. So that isn't a question about an incubation period. It's a question about the other name for crusted scabies, but it's like a red herring, and it might, if you weren't sure about this answer, you might be thinking you could use this question as, to form the basis of the answer to the question we just reviewed. So we did write to APIC because we feel like if you're going to put a question in, you should be using accurate information. It should really be a case of scabies, not a fake case. So anyway, just stuff to think about as you're going through. Okay, number 10, a nurse is concerned that a patient in the neurology ward has a prion disease after receiving a lab report stating that the patient had a positive nucleic acid test for John Cunningham virus in the cerebral spinal fluid. What is the best response to give this nurse? A, the test is positive for CJD or Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is a prion disease. B, the test is positive for Campylobacter jejuni, which is not a prion disease. C, the test is positive for JCV, a polyomavirus or John Cunningham virus. D, the test is positive for JCV, a polyomavirus, which is a prion disease. They're smart. Okay, so the answer to this one is in fact C. I had no idea when I went through this. What is this is how I can do it over here, is to show the results, I guess. All right, anyway, never mind about that. So the answer is C. And what is a polyomavirus? So they usually infect mammals and birds, and there are only 13 out of the 85 known that have a reservoir in humans, and this is just a list of other polyomaviruses, which I've never seen one. Have you? Yeah, has anybody on the phone seen John Cunningham? What did you say? You've seen Merkel cell polyomavirus? Yeah, so I've never seen one of these. Okay. An IP is conducting an educational session to help the nursing staff understand infectious disease transmission. She explains that the initial element in virulence is the ability of an organism to survive in the external environment during transit between hosts. What is the second element of virulence? A, secretion of enzymes that enhance spread through tissues. B, a mechanism for transmission to a new host. C, invasion and dissemination in the host. And D, avoidance of host resistance. And this one is in chapter 22, microbial pathogenicity and host response. Okay, so excellent. Most of you are saying B, and it's between A. It's kind of the same spread on the for the folks who are doing the chat box. So the correct answer is B, a mechanism for transmission to a new host. And I'm just going to read what they have in there in the book here. It's a nice explanation. The second element in virulence is a mechanism for transmission to a new host. For example, insect vectors may transmit pathogens by injecting material from salivary glands or defecation into the sites of penetration of host skin. Some viruses can survive and be transmitted to hands from environmental surfaces such as bed rails. Some bacteria possess mechanisms of motility. When a microorganism reaches a favorable site for inducing disease, it must adhere to the structure that it will infect in order to survive. So these are, this is the chain of infection, and all of these things have to be linked up together for an infection to be transmitted from one person to another. So you need a reservoir, a way that the infection gets out of the body, a mode of transmission, a route of entry, a susceptible host. So it seems kind of complicated, and like a lot of steps have to go through that to actually create an infection. So there are opportunities, and the reason it's a chain is, as many of you probably have seen this before, if you can break any of those links, you can prevent that infection from spreading. So those are the opportunities where we work as infection preventionists. This is the epidemiologic triangle. It's another visual tool that can kind of help you, agent, environment, and host all work together in the context of the disease. So you guys can look at this on your own, but this is just a way it calls out all those specific areas and how they work to promote the spread of infection and also provide opportunities for preventing the spread. Number 12, the management of an infected surgical site includes the following foundational principles. 1, open and drain the incision. 2, debride fibrous debris in necrotic soft tissue. 3, replace hardware. 4, implement antimicrobial management as needed. 5, manage the open wound. So A is all of the above, all 1, 2, 3, and 4. So all but one of these is right, and you get to choose from the 4. All right, most of you are saying D on the chat box. Okay, I also went. The answer is D. And the reason the answer is D is replacing hardware is not a foundational principle, but for those of you who work in orthopedics and see these kinds of hardware infections, if it gets infected, it does get replaced or removed. So this is really carefully read the question. It's looking for foundational principles, and most of you caught that. So good for you guys. Number 13, during annual tuberculin skin testing, an employee's test result was read as 10 millimeters of induration. The employee's last test, TST, was negative. This initial result indicates A, a positive test, B, a false positive, C, a negative test, and D, a false negative. Okay, most of you saying A, and I think A is the correct answer. Okay, so I think I put this in here. Everything you need to know about tuberculin skin tests is here at the CDC. Let me see if it'll let me go there. I love it when I click on my own link. So this link will get you here. And why I'm going here is they have a nice table that helps you, figure out which, I need to look at this later. Somebody just asked me a question about this, and I just realized the answer is in this link. Yeah, so everything you need to know is here. So 10 millimeters of induration is generally, 10 millimeters increase over the last test is generally positive for a person. And I'm just realizing you guys can't see this screen, so let me do a new share here. So this is what this website looks like when you go to it. And it's all there. And testing healthcare workers. It works you through the two-step test and how to interpret a result, which can be tricky. And you know what? If you guys get positive results and you don't know what to do, call your local health department. They can often help walk you through that. For those of you doing employee health, we're going to go back to the slideshow. Okay, next question. A microbe that can grow in the absence of oxygen but is also able to utilize oxygen for growth is an anaerobe, B, an obligate anaerobe, C, a facultative anaerobe, and D, a microaerophilic aerobe, excuse me. Okay, so in the chat box, these, it's the same, A's, B's, and C's. So C, I believe, is the correct answer. So I added the definitions to this slide. So an aerobe grows in the presence of oxygen. An obligate anaerobe will only grow in the absence of oxygen. A facultative anaerobe will use oxygen but are able to grow in the absence of oxygen. And D, a microaerophilic aerobe needs only a small amount of oxygen to grow. Western blot testing for human immunodeficiency virus is used to detect A, HIV DNA in a serum sample, B, HIV RNA in a serum sample, C, HIV antibodies in a serum sample, and D, HIV proteins in a serum sample. Okay, C's, D's, and B's are on the, yeah, mostly C's though. And you guys are correct. HIV antibodies in a serum sample is what the Western blot testing is for HIV. So Western blot testing is a confirmatory test. It confirms the result of its enzyme immunoabsorbent assay, or EIA. So how it works is HIV proteins are run through a gel matrix, and then they transfer those proteins to a thin membrane. The membrane is then incubated with a serum sample. They wash that and incubate it with a secondary sample. If antibodies to the HIV protein that will run through the gel matrix are present in the serum sample, they will not be washed away. So it's a confirmatory test. 16, an infection preventionist is reviewing the cerebral spinal fluid results from a patient admitted the previous night. The CSF is cloudy and has an elevated white blood cell count, markedly increased neutrophils, low glucose level, and elevated protein concentration. Which type of meningitis should she suspect? A, bacterial, B, viral, C, fungal, and D, aseptic. Okay, wow, everybody knew that was bacterial. Excellent. Okay, so just a couple of you, and so this table, this is blurry. I know you can't really see it, but this PDF is available in the folder for Chapter 1. It's the Week 1-2 folder that has, I think it's called Identification of Infectious Disease Process. This is in there as a PDF. It's a quick reference sheet that somebody made who worked in this. Dana Wynn made this when she was studying. So it separates the different kinds of meningitis. It calls out their transmission, symptoms, that kind of thing. This chapter, the meningitis chapter and the APIC text, is really important to review because there are questions like this. So you have to be able to figure out, determine one from the other. Number 17, which of the following statements about influenza is false? A, influenza is primarily spread between individuals via respiratory secretion or droplets. B, viral shedding starts 48 to 72 hours after infection and typically 48 hours before the onset of symptoms. C, viral shedding normally persists for less than 5 days but can be longer in children and immunocompromised persons. And D, the typical influenza symptomology is not always predictive of influenza in elderly or immunocompromised persons. Okay. Yeah, so same on the chat, A, B's, and C's, with a lot more A's on the phone, on the chat box than on this slide. So the answer is B. That is the false one. Viral shedding starts 48 to 72 hours after an infection and typically 48 hours before the onset of symptoms. So I'm going to read the rationale in the book because this was one where most folks, yeah, it was kind of, yeah, so where is it? Okay, influenza viruses are spread from person to person through droplets. We knew that. Transmission via large particle droplets requires close contact between the source and recipient because droplets do not remain suspended in the air and generally travel only a short distance, less than or equal to a meter. Contact with a respiratory droplet contaminated surfaces is another possible source of transmission. The typical incubation period for influenza is 1 to 4 days, average 2 days. Adults shed influenza virus from the day before symptoms begin through 5 to 10 days after illness onset. However, the amount of virus shed and presumably infectivity usually decreases rapidly by day 3 to 5. Young children also might shed virus several days before illness onset, and children can be infectious for 10 or more days after onset of symptoms. Severely immunocompromised persons can shed virus for weeks or months. So the answer here is people start shedding influenza virus from the day before symptoms begin through 5 to 10 days after illness onset. 18. Which of the following statements is false regarding influenza viruses? A, they are divided into 3 categories, A, B, and C. B, influenza A strains have been the predominant cause of worldwide epidemics or pandemics. C, influenza A and B strains have been named according to the city or state and year of their initial isolation. And D, influenza B strains have not been associated with large epidemics. I do terrible on these false, pick the one false answer. This is one of my areas where I need to slow down and read the question. So how are you guys doing with this one? All right, most of you on the chat line are saying C and D as well. Let's see. So the answer is D. Influenza B strains have not been associated with large epidemics. Let's see, what are the other answers there? People went for C. That's true. So influenza A and B strains are named according to the city or state or year of their isolation. And so when you look at the component that is in the flu vaccine, or when they talk about the circulating virus, that's why it's called, like Yamagata is one, Victoria is one. That's where the influenza strains were first identified. And then A is also true. There is an influenza C. It's very rare. I didn't know about it until I started studying for this test and came to this question. And I work at the Department of Health where we monitor flu every year. Okay, so where are we with time? Okay, it's 1 o'clock. I'm gonna close the call. I like to end on time. I usually like to end on a round question. So we're gonna end on 19, so I'll write myself a note. I will send out after this webinar, in fact, I am going to do it right now, a link to the Google Drive to everyone who attended today. And I'm also going to send the recording out to everyone who registered so that they can view or listen, God help them, to me talk for an hour about the study group. So I'm going to make that a habit every week, and I'll store the recordings in a folder on the Google Drive. So thank you guys for your patience. Does anybody have any last questions or comments? Oh, you're welcome, everybody. Thank you. I really appreciate that you're attending this, and congratulations on starting the process of studying for this test. You're all going to pass, and you're all going to pass this year. So we'll see you next Wednesday, and you can send me questions on my email, and if I don't get right back to you, I'm out of the office a lot, and I forget to put my out-of-office email in. I will get back to you, though. So thank you, and I'll see you next Wednesday. And thank you, Stacy, for helping me set up.
No problem. Bye, Patty.
Bye-bye.